Commander Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the deep space research vessel New Horizon. The ship was 3 months into a routine survey mission near the Outer Rim territories when something unexpected happened. The communications console began flashing with an incoming transmission. "Sir, we're getting something strange," said Lieutenant Sam Davis, the communications officer. "It's very weak, but it's coming through on 17 different frequencies." Jake leaned forward. In his 15 years of space service, he had never seen anything like this. "Put it through the speakers." The bridge filled with static and broken words. The language was Galactic Standard, but it was poorly spoken, as if whoever was transmitting was not used to the language. Dr. Lisa Chang, the ship's expert on alien languages, hurried to her station. "Can you clean that up?" Jake asked. Lisa worked quickly at her console. "I'm trying, sir. Whoever is sending this is using an old transmission method. It's very basic, like they're using emergency equipment." As the signal became clearer, the crew could hear desperation in the alien voice. The words were broken and scared. "Please, anyone, help us. The Krovar are killing everyone. We have lost 2 worlds. Billions dead." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Krovar Empire was known throughout the galaxy as a military power that did not negotiate. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. "Lisa, can you get more details?" Jake asked. Lisa nodded and continued working. After 20 minutes, she had decoded most of the message. What she found made the entire bridge crew go silent. The transmission was from the Zephyrian Coalition. Jake knew them well. They were peaceful aliens who had helped humanity many times. The Zephyrians were doctors and farmers, not soldiers. They had shared medical knowledge that had saved millions of human lives. The message explained that the Krovar Empire had attacked without warning. They were not trying to conquer the Zephyrian worlds. They were destroying everything and everyone. 2 entire planets had been wiped clean of life. The remaining Zephyrian colonies were under attack. "The worst part is here," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "They sent messages to the Galactic Council asking for help. The Council refused. They said the Zephyrians were acceptable losses to keep peace with the Krovar Empire." Jake stood up from his chair. He had served in space long enough to know that politics often got in the way of doing what was right. But this was different. This was genocide. The final part of the message made Jake's hands clench into fists. The Zephyrian voice said, "We have heard stories about a young species called humanity. They say you understand justice. We know you are far away and small compared to the great powers. But please, if anyone can hear this, help us. We are dying." The bridge was completely quiet for a long moment. Jake looked at his crew. These were good people who had joined the space service to explore and help others. Now they were faced with a choice that could change everything. "Sir," said Lieutenant Davis, "what do we do?" Jake thought about his orders. The New Horizon was supposed to be mapping star systems, not getting involved in galactic politics. But Jake also thought about the times Zephyrian doctors had worked alongside human medics during disasters. He thought about the agricultural techniques they had shared that now fed millions of people on Earth. "Set course for Earth," Jake said finally. "Maximum speed, sir?" asked his second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. "That's a 3-week journey. We're supposed to complete our mapping mission." Jake turned to face his crew. "The mapping mission can wait. I'm not going to let good people die while we count stars. If the Galactic Council won't help, maybe Earth will." As the New Horizon changed course toward human space, Jake sent his own message to Earth Fleet Command. He included the full Zephyrian transmission and his own report about what was happening. During the long journey back to Earth, Jake could not stop thinking about the message. The galaxy was full of powerful civilizations that could easily stop the Krovar if they worked together, but they chose to look the other way because it was easier than fighting. Lisa spent the journey learning more about the situation. She contacted other human ships and found that several had received similar messages. The Krovar Empire was not just attacking the Zephyrians. They were also making moves toward human colonies on the Outer Rim. "Commander," Lisa reported one day, "I've been analyzing Krovar movement patterns. They've been testing our defenses for months. Those pirate attacks on our mining stations, I think those were actually Krovar scouts." Jake realized that helping the Zephyrians was not just about doing the right thing. It was about protecting humanity's future. If the Krovar could destroy the Zephyrians without consequences, they would eventually come for human worlds too. When the New Horizon finally reached Earth, Jake was surprised by what he found. The planet was buzzing with activity. Military ships were moving in and out of orbit. It seemed like Earth Fleet Command had already received his message and many others like it. Jake was called to an immediate meeting with Admiral Frank Hayes. The Admiral was a tough man who had served during humanity's first contact with hostile aliens 30 years earlier. Commander Morrison, the Admiral said, "Your message arrived at an interesting time. We've been getting similar reports from 17 other ships. The Zephyrians have been trying to contact anyone who will listen." Jake nodded. "What's Earth's response going to be, sir?" Admiral Hayes looked out the window at the ships preparing for departure. "That's being decided right now. President Santos has called an emergency meeting of the United Earth Defense Council. Your report might be the thing that tips the balance." Jake spent the next 2 days waiting while Earth's leadership debated. He knew that getting involved would mean war with one of the galaxy's major powers. Humanity was still considered a minor species by galactic standards. But he also knew that sometimes doing the right thing required taking big risks. Finally, the answer came. Jake was called back to meet with Admiral Hayes, who had a grim smile on his face. "Commander," the Admiral said, "I hope you're ready for the biggest military operation in human history. President Santos has decided that no one gets to commit genocide while humanity watches. We're going to war." Jake felt a mix of fear and pride. Fear, because he knew the Krovar Empire was powerful and dangerous. Pride because humanity was choosing to stand up for what was right, even when it would be easier to look away like everyone else. As Jake prepared to rejoin his ship, now part of the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, he thought about the desperate Zephyrian voice in that transmission. Soon, that voice would have an answer. Humanity was coming. President Maria Santos stood at the head of the long table in the emergency session room. Around her sat the most important people in Earth's government and military. The room was tense as everyone waited to hear what humanity would do about the Zephyrian crisis. Admiral Frank Hayes stood up to present the situation. His voice was steady and serious as he explained what they knew. "The Krovar Empire has destroyed 2 Zephyrian homeworlds completely. Our estimates say they have killed over 3 billion innocent people. The remaining Zephyrian colonies are under attack right now." General Katie Brooks, the head of Earth's Special Operations Command, added her own intelligence. "We have confirmed that the Krovar have been testing our defenses for the past 6 months. Those attacks on our mining stations that we thought were pirates, they were actually Krovar military scouts gathering information about our capabilities." Dr. Alan Foster from the Xenological Institute explained the bigger picture. "The galaxy's major powers have been letting the Krovar expand by destroying smaller species. The Stellar Federation, the Hegemony Alliance, and the other big civilizations think that if they ignore the problem, it will not affect them. They are wrong." President Santos had been listening carefully to all the reports. She had been in politics for 20 years, and she understood that decisions like this could change the course of history. But she also understood that some things were more important than politics. "What would it take to stop the Krovar?" she asked. General Brooks pulled up a display showing military numbers. "The Krovar Empire has a large military, but it's designed to fight one enemy at a time. They have never faced an opponent that fights the way humans do. Our tactics are different from anything they have seen." Admiral Hayes nodded in agreement. "Human military doctrine focuses on speed, coordination, and total commitment to victory. Most galactic species fight limited wars with specific goals. When humans fight, we fight to win completely." President Santos looked around the table at her advisors. These were smart people who understood the risks. Getting involved in a war with the Krovar Empire could mean the destruction of human colonies. But doing nothing could mean the same thing eventually, plus the knowledge that they had let genocide happen while they watched. Secretary of Defense Paul Martinez spoke up. "Madam President, we have another consideration. The Zephyrians have been our allies for 15 years. They shared medical technology that eliminated cancer on Earth. They helped us develop food production systems that ended hunger on 12 of our colonies. We owe them." President Santos thought about her own daughter, who had been saved by Zephyrian medical treatment when she was sick as a child. Millions of human families had similar stories. The Zephyrians had never asked for anything in return for their help. They had simply shared their knowledge because they believed it was right. "What about the Galactic Council?" asked Foreign Minister Linda Garcia. If we act without their approval, we could be expelled from galactic civilization. Dr. Foster laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Galactic Council has shown that they care more about keeping powerful bullies happy than protecting innocent people. Maybe it's time for a new kind of galactic civilization. President Santos stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of Earth's capital city. 12 billion people lived on Earth, and billions more lived on human colonies throughout space. As their leader, her first responsibility was to protect them. But she also believed that with power came the responsibility to help others. General Brooks, she said, turning back to the table, how long would it take to mobilize our full military? General Brooks looked surprised. Our full military, Madam President? That would be the largest mobilization in human history. It would take 72 hours to get everything moving. And how long to reach Zephyrian space? Admiral Hayes checked his calculations. 6 weeks, Madam President. But we could start hitting Krovar supply lines and outer positions much sooner. President Santos made her decision. It was the kind of decision that would be remembered for centuries, but she knew it was right. Here's what we're going to do, she said, her voice strong and clear. We're not just going to help the Zephyrians. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when someone commits genocide while humanity is watching. General Brooks, begin Operation Righteous Fury. I want every ship, every soldier, and every weapon we have ready for war. The room erupted in activity as her advisors began making preparations, but President Santos raised her hand for silence. I want to be very clear about something, she continued. This is not a limited military action. This is not a negotiation. We are going to war with the Krovar Empire, and we are going to fight until they surrender unconditionally, or until they no longer exist as a threat to anyone. Admiral Hayes stepped forward. Madam President, that's a very big commitment. The Krovar Empire has been a major galactic power for over 200 years. President Santos smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, she looked confident. Admiral, the Krovar Empire has never fought humans before. They have no idea what they're dealing with. When humans go to war, we don't fight to make a point. We fight to win, and we don't stop until we do. Over the next 3 days, Earth became the center of the largest military mobilization in human history. Ships that had been on exploration missions were recalled. Reserve units were activated. Factories that made civilian goods were converted to produce weapons and supplies. The mobilization was not secret. President Santos wanted the galaxy to see what humanity was doing. She wanted the Krovar Empire to know that their actions had consequences. Most importantly, she wanted the surviving Zephyrians to know that help was coming. On the third day, President Santos gave a speech that was broadcast across human space and transmitted to every government in the galaxy. Her words were simple and direct. To the Krovar Empire we say this: your actions against the Zephyrian people are crimes against all civilized life. You have 3 choices. You can surrender immediately and face trial for your crimes. You can withdraw from all Zephyrian territory and pay reparations for the damage you have caused. Or you can continue your current path and face the full military might of humanity. She paused and looked directly into the camera. To our friends the Zephyrians we say this: help is coming. We have not forgotten your kindness to humanity. We will not abandon you in your darkest hour. Finally, she addressed the other major powers in the galaxy. To the Galactic Council and the other civilizations that chose to look away while genocide was committed, we say this: your failure to act does not mean humanity will fail to act. We will do what you should have done, and when this is over, we will remember who stood with us and who stood aside. As the human fleet prepared to depart for Zephyrian space, President Santos received one final message. It was from the surviving Zephyrian leadership, transmitted from their last remaining stronghold. Thank you, the message said simply. We knew humanity would not abandon us. President Santos smiled as she watched the largest fleet in human history leave Earth's orbit. The Krovar Empire was about to learn something that would change the galaxy forever. When humans made a promise, they kept it. 6 months after the war began, the galaxy was in complete shock. What everyone expected to be a quick defeat of the upstart human species had turned into something no one had ever seen before. The Krovar Empire, one of the most feared military powers in galactic history, was not just losing. They were being systematically destroyed. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker stood on the bridge of the troop transport ship Iron Fury, watching the planet below. This was the fourth Crovar-held world his unit had liberated in the past month. His battalion, nicknamed Death's Head by the enemy, had become legendary throughout Crovar space for their relentless tactics. "Colonel," said Major Beth Anderson, his second-in-command, "intelligence reports that the Crovar garrison has abandoned their positions and retreated to the northern continent. They left behind about 3,000 Zephyrian prisoners." Steve nodded grimly. This was the pattern they had seen on every world. The Crovar would fight fiercely at first, confident in their superior numbers and equipment. But when they realized they were facing humans, something changed. Human tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Other species fought wars with careful rules and limited objectives. They would capture a few strategic points, negotiate for a while, then either win or lose based on political agreements. Humans fought differently. When humans went to war, they fought to completely destroy their enemy's ability to continue fighting. Captain Rachel Martinez commanded the destroyer UES Retribution, which had just finished clearing Crovar ships from the system. Her ship had pioneered the human tactic that terrified Crovar commanders: ramming speed. When human ships ran out of ammunition, they didn't retreat. They used their ships as weapons, ramming enemy vessels at high speed. "Captain," said her weapons officer, Lieutenant Carlos Rivera, "we've destroyed the last Crovar patrol ship. The system is clear." Rachel looked at the tactical display. 6 months ago, this system had been heavily defended by Crovar forces. Now it was under human control, and the liberation of the planet below could begin. "Signal the ground forces," she ordered. "Tell Colonel Parker his boys can go to work." On the planet's surface, Steve Parker was already preparing his assault. But this would not be like the careful, methodical attacks that other species used. This would be Operation Avalanche, the largest coordinated assault in galactic history. Colonel Amy Johnson, watching from the command ship New Victory, coordinated attacks on 47 different Crovar-held systems at the same time. While other species fought wars one battle at a time, humans had learned to fight everywhere at once. The speed and coordination overwhelmed Crovar defenses that were designed to handle single enemies attacking predictable targets. "All units report ready," said her communications officer, Lieutenant Dan Cooper. "Operation Avalanche is go in T-minus 30 seconds. Amy watched as human forces across an entire region of space began their attacks. The Crovar had never faced anything like this. They were used to fighting wars where they could move reinforcements from one battle to another. But when humans attacked 47 places at once, there were no reinforcements to move. General Thaxmore, the supreme commander of Crovar forces, sat in his command center trying to understand what was happening. In 200 years of Crovar expansion, they had never lost a war. They had conquered dozens of species and destroyed many more, but humans were different. "General," said his intelligence officer, Commander Veltar, "I have completed my analysis of human tactical patterns. The results are disturbing." Thaxmore looked at the data his officer had compiled. What he saw made his blood cold. Humans did not fight to win territory or resources. They fought to completely eliminate their enemy's ability to make war. When humans liberated a world, they did not just drive off the occupying forces. They hunted down every Crovar official, destroyed every piece of military equipment, and made it impossible for the Crovar to ever return. "Look at this," Veltar continued, showing footage from a recently liberated world. "After defeating our garrison, the humans spent 2 weeks systematically destroying every Crovar installation. They did not just capture our equipment. They melted it down so it could never be used again. But the most disturbing part was what humans did after they won. Other species would negotiate with defeated enemies, arrange prisoner exchanges, and eventually make peace. Humans did something the galaxy had never seen. They put war criminals on trial. Major Dan Cooper led the Psychological Warfare Division, broadcasting messages throughout Crovar space. The messages showed rescued Zephyrian civilians, evidence of Crovar war crimes, and promises that every person responsible for genocide would be hunted down and brought to justice. "Attention Crovar forces," Cooper's latest broadcast began. "This is Major Dan Cooper of the Human Psychological Operations Division. We have evidence of war crimes committed by your units on 17 different worlds. Every officer who participated in these crimes will be identified and captured. Every soldier who followed illegal orders will face trial. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to galactic law. Continue fighting, and you will be hunted across the galaxy until justice is done. The broadcasts were having a devastating effect on Krovar morale. Their soldiers were trained to fight and die for their empire. They were not prepared to face an enemy that promised to hunt them down individually for the rest of their lives. Back on the liberated planet, Steve Parker watched as his medics treated rescued Zephyrian prisoners. The aliens were in terrible condition after months of Krovar captivity. But they were alive, and that was what mattered. "Colonel," said Sergeant Mike Davis, one of his squad leaders, "the prisoners are asking when we're going to negotiate with the Krovar for a ceasefire." Steve looked at the Zephyrian refugees. These were good people who had never hurt anyone. They still thought in terms of the old galactic politics, where wars ended with negotiations and compromises. "Tell them there won't be any negotiations," Steve said firmly. "Tell them that humans don't stop fighting until the enemy surrenders completely. Tell them that every Krovar responsible for genocide will face trial, and every Zephyrian world will be free." As news of human victory spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to take notice. The Galactic Council, which had refused to help the Zephyrians, was now demanding that humanity accept a reasonable peace agreement that would leave the Krovar Empire weakened but intact. Ambassador Claire Phillips, representing humanity at an emergency council session, gave a response that would be remembered for centuries. "You had your chance to do the right thing," she told the assembled alien diplomats. "You chose to look away while genocide was committed. Now you get to watch us do what you should have done." The human war machine continued its relentless advance. Planet after planet fell to human forces. System after system was liberated, and with each victory, the galaxy began to understand that something fundamental had changed. Humanity had shown that genocide would not be tolerated, that war criminals would not escape justice, and that sometimes doing the right thing required total commitment to victory. The old galactic order, based on appeasement and calculated indifference, was coming to an end. The Krovar Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for 2 centuries, was learning what happened when they picked a fight with a species that believed some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen anything like the emergency session taking place. Representatives from 300 different species filled the massive hall, all trying to understand how a war they had expected to last a few weeks had completely changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Ambassador Claire Phillips sat calmly at the human delegation table while alien diplomats argued around her. For the past hour, she had listened to speaker after speaker demand that humanity accept a peace treaty that would end the war, but leave the Krovar Empire mostly intact. The Hegemony Alliance representative, a tall blue-skinned alien named Zorthak, was especially angry. "The humans must be stopped," he declared to the assembly. "They are disrupting the careful balance that has kept galactic peace for centuries." Claire stood up slowly. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to her. She was a small woman compared to most of the alien representatives, but her presence filled the room. "Balance?" she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "You call it balance when the strong are allowed to destroy the weak without consequence? You call it peace when genocide goes unpunished as long as the killers are powerful enough?" The Stellar Federation representative, an insect-like creature called Hive Mind Tertius, buzzed angrily. "The Krovar Empire has been a stable force in this galaxy for 200 years. The humans are destroying that stability with their reckless actions." Claire looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces staring at her. 200 years of stability built on fear and appeasement. 200 years of letting bullies grow stronger, while their victims grew weaker. That stability was purchased with the blood of innocent species who trusted you to protect them. She activated a holographic display that showed images from the liberated Krovar worlds. The aliens in the chamber saw footage of rescued Zephyrian civilians, evidence of mass graves, and documentation of systematic genocide. "This is what your stability looked like to the Zephyrians," Claire continued. "This is what it looked like to the 17 other species the Krovar have exterminated, while you maintained your careful balance." The chamber erupted in angry voices as different species argued with each other. Some supported the human position, especially smaller species that had lived in fear of Krovar expansion. Others, particularly the major powers, demanded that humanity be stopped before they upset the galactic order even more. High Counselor Prextos, the leader of the Galactic Council, called for order. He was an ancient alien whose species had dominated galactic politics for over 1,000 years. Ambassador Phillips, he said, the Council recognizes humanity's passionate response to the Zephyrian situation, but surely you must see that continuing this war serves no one's interests. Claire smiled, but there was steel in her expression. High Counselor, I think you misunderstand our position. This war doesn't serve humanity's interests either. It's costing us ships, soldiers, and resources we could use for peaceful purposes. But some things are more important than interests. She paused and looked directly at the High Counselor. You had your chance to do the right thing. You chose to declare the Zephyrians acceptable losses to maintain peace with a genocidal empire. Now you get to watch us do what you should have done. While the politicians argued, the war itself had reached its climax. Admiral Tony Wright commanded a fleet of 2,000 human vessels as they surrounded Krovar Prime, the heart of the Krovar Empire. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. Admiral, reported Captain Susan Lee from the battleship UES Thunder, all attack groups are in position. The Krovar fleet is trapped between our forces and their own planet. Tony looked at the tactical display. The Krovar had assembled every available ship to defend their homeworld. It was an impressive fleet that would have terrified any other species in the galaxy, but humans had learned to fight in ways that the Krovar could not counter. Begin Operation Fortress, Tony ordered. Instead of a direct assault, the human fleet began a carefully coordinated siege, using tactics developed from ancient human naval warfare. They surrounded the entire planet and systematically disabled every orbital defense, every military installation, and every government facility. But this was not just destruction for its own sake. As each Krovar installation was disabled, human engineers moved in to shut down weapon systems while leaving life support and civilian infrastructure intact. The humans were not trying to destroy the planet. They were trying to end the Krovar Empire's ability to make war. On the planet's surface, Colonel Linda Garcia led Operation Justice, the liberation of Krovar slave camps. What her forces found there shocked even battle-hardened human soldiers. Millions of aliens from dozens of different species had been held in conditions that were worse than anything humanity had imagined. Colonel, reported Major Kevin Brown, we found another camp. This one has about 50,000 prisoners from 12 different species. Some of them have been here for over 20 years. Linda watched as human medics and engineers worked around the clock to save people that the galactic community had written off as lost. The images were broadcast across the galaxy, showing the true extent of Krovar atrocities and humanity's methodical rescue operations. Dr. Carl Thompson, now leading the Galactic Reconstruction Initiative, had been planning for this moment since the war began. Unlike other species that fought for territory or resources, humanity had been preparing for peace from day one. The key, Carl explained to his team, is that we're not occupying these worlds. We're helping them rebuild themselves. The liberated worlds will be stronger and more prosperous than they were before the war. Human engineers worked alongside local populations to build new hospitals, schools, and industrial facilities. Former Krovar slave worlds were transformed into thriving colonies with their own governments and military forces capable of defending themselves. As the siege of Krovar Prime continued, something unprecedented happened. Other species began joining the human fleet. Ships from minor powers that had lived in fear of Krovar expansion arrived to participate in the liberation. Captain Maria Lopez, commanding the UES Freedom, found herself working alongside vessels from 6 different species. This is incredible, she reported to Admiral Wright. I've got a Zephyrian medical ship, 2 Deltarian cruisers, and 3 ships from species I've never even met before. They all want to help with the rescue operations. The war was no longer just about humanity versus the Krovar Empire. It had become a galaxy-wide movement to end the age of appeasement and establish real consequences for genocide. Emperor Vextar, the leader of the Krovar Empire, sat in his palace bunker watching his civilization collapse around him. For 200 years, his empire had grown through conquest and intimidation. They had always been able to count on other species being too afraid or too selfish to interfere with their expansion. Your Majesty, said General Thaxmore, our remaining fleet commanders are requesting permission to surrender. They say continuing to fight is pointless. Vextar looked at the reports from across his empire. World after world had fallen to human forces, but more disturbing was what happened after the humans won. They did not behave like conquerors. They behave like liberators, freeing prisoners and rebuilding worlds. The humans fight like no species we have ever encountered. Thaxmore continued. They do not seek conquest or resources. They seek justice, and they will not stop until they achieve it. As the battle for Krovar Prime reached its conclusion, Emperor Vextar made the decision that would end the war. He ordered the complete surrender of all Krovar forces and agreed to face trial for war crimes. The news of the surrender reached the Galactic Council just as Ambassador Phillips was concluding her speech to the Assembly. The war is over, she announced. The Krovar Empire has surrendered unconditionally. Their leaders will face trial for their crimes. Their victims will be free, and the galaxy will learn that genocide has consequences. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The age of appeasement was over. A new era of galactic justice had begun, led by a species that most had considered primitive just 1 year earlier. High Counselor Prextos looked at the small human woman who had just announced the end of one of the galaxy's major powers. What happens now, Ambassador Phillips? Claire smiled, and for the first time since the war began, it was a smile of hope rather than determination. Now we build something better. Now we create a galaxy where no species has to plead for help while everyone else looks away. The trial of Emperor Vextar was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. For the first time in galactic history, the leader of a major power was being held accountable for genocide. The courtroom was filled with representatives from every species in known space, and the proceedings were broadcast live across thousands of worlds. Judge Admiral Patricia Barnes presided over the War Crimes Tribunal from her seat aboard the UES Justice, a ship specifically converted to serve as a mobile court. She had been chosen not just for her legal expertise, but because she had personally led rescue operations on 12 different worlds during the war. Emperor Vextar, Judge Barnes said, looking down at the defeated Krovar leader, you stand accused of ordering the systematic extermination of 17 different species, resulting in the deaths of over 40 billion sentient beings. How do you plead? Vextar looked around the courtroom. A year ago, he had commanded one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy. Now he sat in chains, facing testimony from thousands of survivors. The trial had been going on for 3 months, and each day brought new evidence of Krovar atrocities. I plead that I was acting in the interest of my empire, Vextar said finally. Expansion and conquest have been galactic norms for centuries. The strong have always ruled the weak. Judge Barnes nodded gravely. That defense might have worked under the old galactic order, but this tribunal operates under new principles. The principle that genocide is always wrong, regardless of who commits it. The principle that following orders is not an excuse for mass murder. And the principle that power comes with responsibility. The next witness was Zorkel, a Zephyrian scientist whose entire family had been killed in the initial Krovar attacks. His testimony was broadcast across the galaxy, and there was not a dry eye among the spectators. They came without warning, Zorkel said, his voice shaking. They did not want our resources or our territory. They simply wanted us to stop existing. My wife, my children, my parents, all gone in a single day. 3 billion of my people murdered because the Krovar Empire decided we were inconvenient. Judge Barnes turned to Vextar. Do you have anything to say to this witness? Vextar was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I thought you were just numbers on a report. I never considered that you were real. People with families and dreams. The trial concluded with Vextar being sentenced to life imprisonment on a secure facility where he would spend his remaining years helping to rebuild the worlds his empire had destroyed. It was a sentence that showed the galaxy that humanity's idea of justice involved both punishment and redemption. President Santos, now serving her second term, stood before the rebuilt Galactic Assembly to deliver the most important speech of her career. The Assembly itself had been transformed. The old Galactic Council, dominated by major powers that made decisions behind closed doors, had been replaced by a democratic body where every species had an equal voice. My fellow beings, President Santos began, we gather today not to celebrate victory in war, but to commit ourselves to preventing the need for such wars in the future. She looked out at the assembled representatives. The hall was filled with species that had been ignored or marginalized under the old system. Former Krovar slave species sat next to representatives from the major powers, all with equal votes in the new assembly. The war we fought was not about conquest or territory, Santos continued. It was about establishing a simple principle, that genocide will have consequences. That the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, and that no species should ever again have to plead for help. While the galaxy looks away, the speech led to the adoption of the Humanity Doctrine, a new interspecies law that had been proposed by the rebuilt Zephyrian Coalition. Under this law, any act of genocide would trigger automatic collective response from all member species. No longer would political considerations or economic interests be allowed to override the moral obligation to protect innocent life. Prime Minister Keltar of the Zephyrian Coalition delivered an emotional address to the Assembly. His species had been saved from extinction by human intervention, and his worlds were now thriving under the reconstruction programs. The humans did not save us because it served their interests, Keltar said. They saved us because it was right. They have shown us that civilization is not about the survival of the strongest, but about the protection of all. The transformation of galactic military doctrine was overseen by Admiral Frank Hayes, now Supreme Commander of the Combined Galactic Defense Force. The old system of competing military forces and shifting alliances had been replaced by integrated peacekeeping operations that could respond quickly to threats anywhere in the galaxy. The key innovation, Admiral Hayes explained to a gathering of military commanders from dozens of species, his rapid response. Under the old system, it took months or years to organize military intervention. By then, genocide could be completed and the perpetrators would claim it was too late to act. The new Combined Defense Force maintained rapid response teams stationed throughout the galaxy. Ships from different species trained together, developed common tactics, and prepared to respond to any threat within days rather than months. But the most important change was not military or political. It was cultural. The war had shown the galaxy that appeasement and indifference were not sustainable strategies for maintaining peace. Real peace required active commitment to justice. Admiral Jake Morrison, the man whose discovery of the Zephyrian distress call had started everything, now commanded the UES New Dawn as it patrolled the Outer Rim territories. His crew was a symbol of the new galactic order, with humans, Zephyrians, and even former Krovar citizens working together. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim, his communications officer, we're receiving a distress signal from an unknown species in the outer spiral region. They say they're under attack by raiders and are requesting assistance. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew included people from 8 different species, all united by the principle that protecting innocent life was more important than politics or convenience. The old Jake Morrison might have hesitated, worried about jurisdiction or authorization. Set course to intercept, Jake ordered without hesitation, maximum speed. As the New Dawn raced toward the distress signal, Jake received confirmation that ships from across the galaxy were responding to the same call. The Zephyrian medical ship Healing Hope was already en route. 3 ships from the former Krovar territory had diverted from their patrol routes. Even vessels from the major powers that had once opposed human intervention were now following the protocols established during the war. Lieutenant Kim monitored the communications. Admiral, we've got 17 ships from 9 different species all converging on the distress signal. The raiders, whoever they are going to be seriously outnumbered. Jake smiled as he watched the tactical display fill with friendly contacts. A year ago, those ships would have belonged to competing military forces that might have gotten in each other's way. Now they were part of a coordinated response force that had trained together and shared common values. When the fleet reached the location of the distress signal, they found a small colony of peaceful aliens under attack by a group of well-armed raiders. The raiders took one look at the assembled galactic fleet and immediately surrendered. But the real victory was not the military response. It was what happened next. Medical ships began treating the wounded colonists. Engineering vessels started repairing damaged infrastructure. Diplomatic teams began working with the colony leadership to establish permanent protection. Within 6 hours, the unknown species had been welcomed into the galactic community with full rights and protections. Their world was designated as a protected zone, and they were offered membership in the Galactic Assembly. As Jake watched the rescue operations, he thought about the message that had started everything. A desperate plea for help from the Zephyrians, transmitted across space in the hope that someone would care enough to respond. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Kim, "we're receiving a message from the colony leadership. They want to thank us for responding so quickly." Jake nodded. "Tell them that's what we do now. Tell them that no plea for help goes unanswered in this galaxy." The message was simple, but it represented a fundamental change in how galactic civilization operated. The age of appeasement was over. The age of indifference had ended. In its place was a new era where the strong protected the weak, where genocide had consequences, and where moral courage was valued more than political convenience. Humanity had not just won a war. They had changed the moral foundation of galactic civilization. They had shown that sometimes doing the right thing required courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to justice. And across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds where people lived free from fear of genocide or oppression, children learned the story of how humanity had responded when the Zephyrians pleaded for help. They learned that when good people asked for protection, brave people answered the call. The galaxy was a better place because humanity had chosen to fight for what was right, rather than what was easy. And that choice would echo through the stars for generations to come.